Most people think they'd notice when something's off, like there'd be a clear sign or something that doesn't add up. But a lot of the time there isn't. Everything just feels normal until you look back and realize it wasn't. And by then, it's already happened. These are a few stories where things didn't turn out the way anyone expected. Story 1. The Assumption. This started as a small issue at work. Something had been changed on a project I was part of, and it caused a problem that shouldn't have happened. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. But once we looked into it properly, it was clear the change came from someone on the team. There weren't many of us who had access, so it didn't take long before people started narrowing it down. Pretty quickly, attention shifted to one guy. He'd been working in that area more than anyone else recently, so it just made sense. Even I thought it was probably him. Not because of anything obvious, just the way everything lined up. No one said it directly, but you could tell people had already decided. The way they spoke to him changed slightly, just enough to notice. Nothing major, just small things that made it feel uncomfortable if you were paying attention closely. So I started paying more attention too. Not trying to prove anything, just watching to see if anything didn't add up. But the more I paid attention, the less convinced I felt. Nothing he did actually confirmed it, which started to bother me. If anything, everything about him just felt normal, and that didn't match what everyone else seemed to believe. So I went back and checked everything properly. Every change, every update from the start. I wasn't looking for anything specific anymore. I just wanted to be sure before this went any further. And that's when I saw it. The change didn't come from him at all. It came from my login, earlier in the week. I'd made a small adjustment I didn't think twice about at the time, but it triggered a chain of changes I hadn't noticed. And it only showed up later, once everything else had built on top of it. So while everyone had quietly decided it was him, it had actually been me the whole time. The next meeting was where it all came to a head. This time, people weren't being subtle about it. They were asking him directly to explain what happened, and you could tell he didn't even know what they were referring to. He was trying to answer, but nothing he said was landing properly, and it was getting more uncomfortable by the second. And I just sat there for a moment, realizing how far it had already gone. So I said it. I explained what I'd found, showed where the change came from, and how it led to everything that followed. The whole room went quiet for a moment, and you could feel the shift straight away. Not just in the situation, but in how everyone had been looking at him before, like it all clicked at once. Not all of these end with a clear answer or some moment where everything gets explained. Sometimes nothing gets resolved at all, and you're just left with the feeling that something wasn't right. And in some ways, that's worse, because it never really goes away. Story 2. The Visit. It started as something small that didn't feel worth questioning at first. Just little things that didn't quite line up properly. My mom would mention plans or conversations like I was already part of them. The problem was, I hadn't heard any of it before. At first I assumed I'd just missed something. Maybe it came up when I wasn't around or I just wasn't paying attention. But then it kept happening, and it got harder to ignore. She'd bring things up like they were obvious, and I'd have no idea what she was talking about. It started to feel like I was slightly out of the loop on things I should have known. So I asked her about it one day, just casually, not trying to make it a big deal. She brushed it off pretty quickly and said it was nothing, just small things that came up randomly. And the way she said it made it sound like I was overthinking it. So I left it there, even though it didn't really feel like nothing. After that, I started noticing it more. The same kind of comments, the same references. Like there were conversations happening somewhere else that I wasn't part of. And that's when it started to feel deliberate. So the next time it happened, I paid more attention. Not just to what she said, but how she said it. And there was always that slight pause when I asked questions. Like she was deciding how much to tell me, or what to leave out. That's when I realized something wasn't adding up. So instead of asking directly again, I just waited. A few days later, I stopped by unexpectedly. Nothing planned, I just showed up. And the reaction was instant, even if it was subtle. The way she opened the door, the way she looked past me for a second before letting me in. Like she was checking something behind me. Inside, everything looked normal at first. But then I noticed a jacket by the door I didn't recognize. Not mine, not hers, just sitting there like it belonged. And for a second I felt like I was about to understand what was going on. I stayed a bit longer than usual, just talking like everything was normal. Waiting for something to give it away. A noise, a voice, anything that would actually explain it. But nothing did. No explanation, no slip-up, nothing obvious that confirmed anything. Just that same feeling sitting there in the background. So eventually I left. And after that, nothing really changed. The same comments kept happening, the same references to things I wasn't part of, but still no answers. And that was the part that stuck with me. Not that something was definitely going on, but that I got close to figuring it out and still didn't. And somehow, that made it harder to let go. Some moments don't build up slowly. You don't get time to question what's happening or figure it out properly. It just happens right in front of you, and by the time you realize what's going on, everyone else has already seen it too. And once that moment passes, you don't really get a chance to take it back. Story 3. The Presentation. This happened during a team presentation I'd spent weeks putting together. It wasn't massive, but it mattered enough that I wanted it done properly. I'd done all of it myself, from the research to the structure, and even how it was going to be explained. So going into the meeting, I wasn't nervous. I knew it inside out, and the plan was simple. My manager would introduce it, then I'd take over and walk everyone through it step by step. The meeting started normally, just people joining, a bit of small talk. Then it moved straight into the presentation. My manager began introducing the project, and at first nothing felt off. It sounded like he was just setting it up. But then he kept going, and that's when it started to feel different. He moved into the details, the same ones I'd spent weeks working through, and didn't pause or look my way. At first I thought he was just giving more context before handing it over, but he didn't stop. He went through each section like it was his, using the same structure, and even the same examples I'd put in, and I just sat there waiting for him to bring me in, thinking it would happen at any point. But it didn't. He went through the entire thing from start to finish, and by the time he reached the end, there was nothing left for me to add. He closed it off, asked if anyone had questions, and moved on like that was it. There was no mention of me, no handover, nothing to even suggest I'd been part of it. For a second, I didn't react because I was still trying to process what had just happened. Then the questions started, and that's when it got worse. People were asking about specific parts of the project, things I knew straight away because I'd built them. But they weren't asking me, they were asking him, and he was answering. Not completely wrong, but not right either. Just enough to sound convincing if you didn't know better. That's when I spoke. I clarified one point, not in a confrontational way, just adding something small that didn't quite line up. The room shifted slightly, and a few people looked at me instead. So I explained a bit more, how the idea actually came together, and why certain decisions were made. The details he hadn't really covered properly. And the more I spoke, the clearer it became. Because now people could see the difference between someone who actually understood it and someone repeating it. After that, the question stopped going to him and started coming to me instead. He didn't interrupt or try to take it back, he just let the meeting finish. And by the end of it, no one needed it explained anymore, because it was obvious. Not everything ends with a big moment or something obvious you can point to. Sometimes it's just a slow change, and you don't really notice it while it's happening. And by the time you do, it's already different. Story 4. The distance. This wasn't something that happened all at once. There wasn't a clear moment where things changed, or anything you could point to and say, that was it. It was just small things at first, the kind you don't really question because they don't seem important on their own. We still saw each other, still talked, still did everything we normally would. On the surface, nothing was actually wrong, but it didn't feel the same. At first I couldn't really explain it. There wasn't anything obvious, just small differences that didn't quite add up. Conversations felt shorter, like they ended before they really got anywhere. Plans became less certain, more like something we might do, instead of something we actually would. I told myself it was just timing, that we were both busy, and things would go back to normal once everything settled down. But it didn't. If anything, it slowly became more noticeable. I was still the one making plans, still the one reaching out first most of the time. And I didn't question it because I never really had before. It just felt like my role in the relationship, something I'd naturally taken on without really thinking about it. Then I stopped. Not as some kind of decision, just because I got caught up in other things. Work got busier, I was seeing friends more, and for once I wasn't thinking about when we'd next meet or what we'd do. And that's when I noticed it. Nothing changed. There was no message asking if I was okay. No. Are we still on for this week? Nothing to replace what I'd stopped doing. Everything went quiet. At first, I told myself it didn't really mean anything. That maybe he was just waiting for me to reach out like I normally would, and I almost did. But a few days turned into a week, and then longer. And the longer it went on, the harder it was to ignore what it actually meant. It wasn't that something had suddenly gone wrong. It was that I'd been filling in the gaps the whole time. All the effort, all the planning, all the small things that made it feel like something was there. And once I stopped, there was nothing underneath it. That's when it really clicked. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly, like something finally made sense. I wasn't stepping back from something that was working. I was stepping back from something that had only been working because I was holding it together. So I didn't say anything. I didn't ask for an explanation or try to fix it, because at that point I already had my answer. I just left things how they were, even when part of me expected something to change. And eventually it faded out completely. Not because of a big argument or a clear ending. Just because there was nothing left to keep it going. Some situations don't feel like anything at the time. You just go along with them and don't really question it. It's only later, when something small doesn't add up, that you start looking back at it differently. And once you do, it's hard to unsee. Story 5. The Favour. This started as something simple. A friend asked if I could cover a shift for him at work, because he said something had come up. It didn't feel like a big deal, so I said yes. I didn't really ask questions, I just assumed he needed the help. At the time it felt like one of those normal things you do for someone, nothing more than that. The shift itself was quiet, nothing unusual happened. I just did the work and went home without thinking about it again. A couple of days later I saw him, and everything seemed completely normal. We spoke like we usually would, no awkwardness, nothing to suggest anything had been off. If anything, it just confirmed what I already thought, that I'd helped him out and that was it. Then later that night, I got a message from someone else we both knew. At first, it didn't make much sense, and I had to read it twice to understand what they were actually asking. They asked me why I'd covered his shift, and I just said he needed it off because something had come up. There was a pause before they replied, which already felt a bit strange. Then they said that wasn't what happened. Apparently, he hadn't needed the shift off for anything important. He'd taken it off so he could go out, and not somewhere casual either, somewhere specific. At first, I thought they were joking, because it didn't match what I'd been told at all. But the more they explained it, the more it started to make sense in a way I didn't like. He hadn't asked me because he needed help. He asked me because he knew I'd say yes without questioning it. Because I wouldn't think twice about it, and I wouldn't ask where he was going or why. So while I was covering his shift, thinking I was helping him out, he was somewhere else, doing exactly what he didn't want me to know about. And that's when it started to click. Not just that moment, but a few others before it. Small things I hadn't really paid attention to at the time, because on their own, they didn't seem like anything. Plans changing last minute, vague excuses, things that didn't quite line up properly. But now they did. And once I saw it like that, it was hard to ignore. Because it wasn't just about that one shift anymore. It was about why he chose me, and how easily I'd said yes without thinking about it. I didn't message him after that. I didn't ask him about it or try to get an explanation, because I already knew what he'd say. And at that point, it didn't really matter. It just made everything else make more sense. Which story stuck with you the most? The first one, or this one? And be honest. Would you say something if you were in that situation, or just leave it and move on?